Hi! So today I thought I could share some of the tools, physical and digital, that I use in my job every day because they make my life easier, and I think there's a real chance that they will make your life easier too. I work as a freelance fashion designer, 3D designer and pattern maker, so if you fit into any of those categories, I think you will find at least one tool in the video that will make your work and maybe your life even better. This is one of the things that made a bigger impact on my work this year, and I got it kind of by chance because I used to have this Logitech mouse that it was really nice, it's ergonomic, so it's very comfortable, especially for long periods of time. So I got that mouse, it was great, and it had two little programmable buttons on the sides. And I use them sometimes to do some things, to program shortcuts, but then that mouse broke this year and I took it to be repaired, and while it was being repaired, my boyfriend lent me this gaming mouse that used to be his gaming mouse, which incidentally it's also from Logitech, but it's not a sponsor, I wish it were. And the thing is that this gaming mouse, it has like 16 programmable buttons. So the amount of customization is huge. So I have this thing configured differently for several of the softwares that I use. For example, I have like a different configuration for when I'm working in Blender, and then when I'm working on Illustrator and on Cloud 3D and things like that. So all the tools that I use more frequently, for example, in Cloud, the pattern editing tool, the curve tool, all the sewing tools and things like that. And especially the delete button, I have all of them in the mouse, and I find that that makes my workflow much faster and easier. For me, it has been a game changer in my work, and also it has the added advantage that it's a gaming mouse, so it's amazing for gaming because that other Logitech mouse was a bit garbage for that. So it doesn't have to be this exact mouse. There are a lot of different mice out there that are for gamers, and they have a lot of programmable buttons too, because the downside of this specific mouse is that it's quite a bit expensive, so maybe you don't want to invest in this one specifically, though it works very well in my humble opinion without having tried any other gaming mouses out there. Mice, but I'm sure you can find a cheaper one, and it's a nice idea to try. And speaking about expensive things that have cheaper alternatives, another thing that I use a lot in my work and also for my hobbies is this graphics tablet, which is not a Wacom tablet. If you're a designer of any kind, probably a graphic tablet and a Wacom tablet are synonyms for you, but I do believe that Wacom have gone crazy with their prices lately. So when I decided that I wanted a graphics tablet, I went for this Huion, I think it's called, and it has worked for me amazingly well for a fraction of the price of what a similar Wacom tablet costs. What do I use it for? So I initially bought it because I like photography as a hobby, and it's way easier to edit pictures with a tablet because you are kind of painting over the picture. It's much more comfortable for your hand, and you can be much more precise than with your mouse. But then it turns out that I discovered that it's immensely helpful for my work too. So I use it to make sketches on Illustrator because, again, it's way more comfortable to hold the pen of the graphics tablet instead of the mouse, and also this tablet has all these buttons for shortcuts, so it kind of compensates for all of my shortcuts that I have on my mouse. I can put them in here and I don't notice that they are gone, especially for Illustrator. And I also use it with other 3D programs, for example like Blender. I don't necessarily use it with Cloud that much. I think I'm more used to using the mouse and the controls on the keyboard because I have to input a lot of numbers in Cloud for the grading usually, so I don't see a lot of advantages of using a tablet like that. But for Blender I do use it a lot. And also this particular tablet, it has a screen, so I can duplicate what I'm seeing in my screen, but also it can act as a second monitor, or in my case as a third monitor, even if you need more space. So for me, I think it was a great investment. And if you do some kind of design work, graphic design work or 3D work, I think it's also a good thing to try, especially considering that there are other brands that are not Wacom and the prices are much more affordable. I think that aside from Huion, there's also Xpen, and I think there are some other lesser known brands, but the one that I have tried personally is this Huion, and I didn't have any problems with it. And now in terms of the software that I use, let's start with the basics. Excel. I do a lot of tech packs and spec sheets, and I cannot understand for the life of me how some designers are still doing tech packs on Illustrator and not using Excel. And yes, they look prettier in Illustrator, but Illustrator can't do math. And essentially on a tech pack, the one thing that you are going to do the most is math. And let me tell you a secret. When you send your tech pack to a factory, nobody gives a fuck about how pretty it looks. It doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is that all the information is presented clearly in the most comprehensible way, and especially that the spec sheets, the measurement sheets are correct. And that is where Excel shines. And besides, you can also do reasonably pretty tech packs on Excel. I like pretty things, so I have spent a good amount of my time doing a tech pack template on Excel that is quite pleasant to the eyes. But that aside, what I like the most is that, for example, I have all my spec sheet here and I can put my formulas for the grading, and just when I put the measurements of the base size, it magically auto-populates all the other sizes if I have put the correct formulas. Or for example, I have this other page which I use after I get a prototype from the factory, and I can put all the measurements that it should have according to the pattern, and then the measurements that the prototype actually has. And thanks to this formula, Excel automatically tells me if there are any discrepancies and how far are those discrepancies from the tolerances. So this saves a lot of time, and you cannot do that on Illustrator. So why is so many people still using it? Okay, so after this passionate love letter to Excel, let's go into the next piece of software. This is the year in which I got fed up with Adobe and their abusive policies, so I canceled my subscription and I signed up for Affinity. I'm not gonna lie, the transition from Adobe to Affinity hasn't been smooth, but in terms of fashion design, Photoshop is very similar to Affinity Photo. It's not exactly the same, but for me the software that I use the most used to be Illustrator, and now Affinity Designer, which is supposed to be the equivalent. I think you can do more or less the same, but I'm still learning because there were a lot of tools that I was used to, and I used to have a lot of different brushes, and I have to go step by step with Affinity, but I'm reasonably sure that I can do pretty much everything that I used to do. I just haven't found the right tools for it because it's also a massive software. But in the end, for technical sketches, you don't really need that many tools. Usually you need the pen tool and a couple of the curve tools and something to put color into them and to put maybe prints, fabrics into them. So all of those tools are available in Affinity Designer. And also it has some other features that I think are a bit better than Illustrator, especially if you work with patterns, because Illustrator wasn't able to open the XF files, which are the standard format for patterns, for clothing patterns, and that is, for example, what I export from Clothes3D. So now I can export my DXF files and open them in Affinity Designer. And the good thing is that I can open that graded DXF pattern and convert it into a PDF, for example. So that wasn't available, that option wasn't available in Illustrator. If you wanted to create a graded pattern from Clothes into Illustrator, first, Illustrator doesn't read DXF, and second, when you try to export your pattern to a PDF file in Clothes, it doesn't export all the grading, it just exports size by size. So you will have to export, like for example, for 6 sizes, you will have to export 6 files individually and then open them one by one on Illustrator and put them together to create a file with all the grading for your pattern. Now you can do all of that in Affinity Designer. So yes, there is life beyond Adobe programs, and I'm quite happy with that switch I made. And also this leads me into my third essential piece of software, and it's of course Clothes3D. Clothes3D is the main software that I use, not just for pattern making, but also for designing. Now more and more I'm doing all of my design process within Clothes because I find that it helps me visualize better the designs that I want to make, and also I am using my own base patterns. So when I have finished making the design, I also have a quite nice pattern that I can alter a bit and refine a bit to make it into a production ready pattern. In the improbable case that you don't know about Clothes3D yet, Clothes is a pattern drafting software that allows you to visualize your garments in 3D. So you get a very realistic simulation of how they fit into a person, in this case, a digital avatar. It doesn't make the patterns for you, you still have to draft the patterns either within the software, or you can import patterns drafted in other softwares like Gerber or like even from Illustrator, but I usually work directly in Clothes. I make all my patterns in Clothes, and I can test, for example, different versions of the same pattern, different versions of the same design, play with color combinations, with fabric combinations, and especially refine the fitting of a garment before I get to make a physical sample. I find that drafting my patterns digitally allows me to be much more precise because you can see measurements that are even less than a millimeter, and it also makes me faster because I can make modifications and pattern alterations much more quicker. And of course, after using it for several years, I have realized that it indeed helps in reducing the number of samples that you need to create a well-fitting garment. And I'm not just talking about the work I do for my clients, but also for the work that I do for myself. Like, I make a lot of clothes for myself. For example, this top I made, and I made it using Clothes3D. And I really hate to make samples when I make clothes for myself because I just want to get into the fun part that is making the final thing. So I didn't even have to do a sample before I got to this. So Clothes has allowed me to do that. I can print the patterns directly with my home printer and start cutting the fabric right away without having to worry about will this fit, it won't fit, I will have to buy more fabric, maybe I don't have enough fabric, all of that. So I really recommend it, not just as a software that you use for your professional career, but also if you are a hobbyist, like if you make clothes for yourself, just for fun, like I used to do before I work in this industry. I think that using Clothes3D has actually made me fall in love with sewing once again, because now I can do all that process in Clothes without spending any money on precious fabrics, and then get just the fun of creating. I don't want this video to become a love letter to Clothes3D, so I'm going to shut up for now, and maybe I will make a video in the future about how and why I use Clothes for my personal projects, and I will indeed declare my undying love for this program. Sit tight if you're interested in that, because it will probably come sooner rather than later. And in the meantime, you can also watch this other video in which I give some context into how I became a fashion designer. I I hope this has been helpful. I hope you have discovered a new tool to try, and that's always exciting. If that's the case, let me know in the comments, and if you have other suggestions for interesting tools that you use in your work or in your hobbies, I would love to know them. So write to me in the comments, and have a lovely rest of your day. See you in the next video.